Hey guys, welcome back. One of the things I wanted to re-release is an interview I did with a real Phantom driver. This was very early on in the channel of when we got to see this very jet start up and taxi around. So our pilot that day, call sign Bluto, I was able to sit with him for a few minutes and pick his brain on what it was like to fly the F4. So figured with the F4E coming to DCS, get some insight on what it was actually like to fly this iconic aircraft. So before we get to that, I got a real funny story about that particular day. So here at our airfield, our aircraft services provider, or also known as a fixed base operator, that provides parking and fuel truck services and stuff like that. Their fuel truck for aviation gasoline was broken for about a month or so, and it just happened, and it was still broken on that particular day. So any aircraft that needed aviation gas had to taxi over to the self-service pumps that's right around the corner from our hangar here. And we got interrupted halfway through talking with them by Lone Star's B-25 taxiing by. So I thought that was pretty funny. So you'll get to see that. The other thing I do want to note is I did flub initially talking to him when I started to say captain instead of colonel. Keep in mind, I am used to the Navy style ranks because I'm retired Coast Guard. So a captain for us is a pretty high ranking officer. And I did not mean any insult when I called our pilot Bluto a captain, which is a lower ranking officer in the Air Force and Marines and Army. So yeah, no disrespect intended there. And I kind of caught myself there and corrected. So without further ado, here is our conversation with Bluto. So enjoy, guys. All right, well, good day, everybody. I'm here with pilot Bluto, a retired Air Force colonel?
Lieutenant Colonel, retired. Yep.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your service, sir.
I appreciate that.
And
thank you.
he is an actual Phantom driver and then later an F-16 Viper driver, but our interest today is in the Phantom that you just got to see flying around. So, Bluto, sir, if you could tell me, what is it like to actually fly this bird?
The Phantom's a pretty feel-oriented airplane, so you're definitely you're not going to get that with as we talked about. So probably some good rules of thumb that you want to keep in mind. The Phantom likes to go about 400 knots.
Okay.
You get much slower than that, and the ways you have to fly the airplane, flight controls you start to change a little bit. So if you stay, under 20,000 feet and over 400 knots, it's its happy place.
Nice. Now, what would be a typical either mission loadout or a combat loadout as far as like weapons and fuel tanks and that kind of configuration? Because it's the one thing we get to do in DCS is play with all sorts of configurations that probably would not ever fly.
Excellent. Well, the Phantom flew every mission, so it could be anything. If you were going out back in the day to do a typical air-to-air loadout, might be primarily heat-seeking missiles in the beginning, and then we moved on to the semi-active radar missiles.
Could this thing carry the 120?
There are variants of it that could.
Okay. Like the early A model, probably.
No, you're talking the AIM-120?
Yes, sir.
Sure. So I think primarily it would have been the foreign military sale versions that carried it. I don't believe in some of the Wild Weasel guys could correct me on this, but I don't believe the G was ever modified to carry the AIM.
Okay.
So we're primarily AIM-set shooters back in the day.
Okay, the Sparrow and the Sidewinder?
And the Sidewinder.
Okay. Yeah. Now, as far as air to mud, what weapons would you typically carry in?
Oh, everything,
All the Mark 80 series?
Sure.
Okay. Any laser guided at some point?
Sure, they did that back in even as far back as the pave penny system and things like that.
Nice.
So I don't know what all stuff you'll have in there, but the guys will have fun playing with that stuff.
All the way to modern, we have the GPU series, all the way up to JDM and JSAL.
Nice.
For the Viper and Hornet guys.
Excellent. Yeah, that'll be a lot of fun.
As far as handling characteristics go, like as far as say air-to-air refueling and then low-speed handling for landings and takeoffs, what was that like?
It's not bad. As you slow down with the Phantom, your angle of attack builds. And as your angle of attack builds, your ailerons become less of a primary control surface for roll. Your rudder takes over and becomes your primary high angle of attack roll control surface.
So heavily rudder dependent.
Rudder dependent, and those ailerons need to stay neutral. Otherwise, you introduce some adverse yaw that causes the airplane to the famous Phantom departure. So it probably gave it its bad name in the beginning.
Probably.
This is a hard wing, so it was even more prone to that. The later models, the E models specifically, was a little friendlier handling airplane, a little more forgiving in that regime.
Okay. So light on the controls, heavy at times, maybe?
Not as heavy on the controls as you probably would guess. Again, once you get the airspeed up, the controls become pretty light. And at 400 knots, it rolls as lightly as a T-38. It's a very responsive airplane to roll. But as you slow down much below really at 300 knots, a 250 knot regime, level flight, then you're starting to get enough angle of attack that the ailerons just aren't that effective.
Right.
And it's an aileron and a spoiler, so it's not a traditional fighter type of setup.
Kind of like the Tomcat where it deploys the spoilers on one wing to help roll. Now, how about the other side of things as far as acceleration? If you put that thing in full burner, how fast are you going to go and how quickly you're going to get there?
Especially at low altitude, it's a really responsive airplane, so you're going to build airspeed rapidly to the point where you're going to, in most air show situations or something where I was limited on speed, I would, my concern would be staying subsonic,
right?
Not building speed, but not getting too much speed.
Okay. What would be a typical do not exceed speed? And I know that's usually configuration and stores dependent, but
entirely stores dependent. The airplane doesn't really have a traditional VMO like an airliner or something that you do not exceed. There are some limitations, but you're never going to reach them. So keep it below 800 knots indicator.
Okay, 800 knots, got it. Now, as far as, let's say, air-to-air refueling, what would be a typical technique that you would use? Because I know in the PC side of things, it tends to get a lot of people frustrated, especially learning that for the first time.
It's no much less frustrating than the real airplane. Most tanker refueling would take place around 310 knots.
Okay, 310.
As I recall. So in that regime, the jet is very pitch sensitive.
Okay.
And unlike the later model fighters that have a recessed air refueling receptacle, the one on the Phantom pops up.
Okay.
So there's nothing to really guide the boom into the air refueling receptacle. So the boomers have a much more challenging time as well.
So you got to get it in the right spot.
And with some loadouts, you'll actually have one engine and afterburner just to have enough thrust because you're behind the thrust required curve far enough at that speed.
Okay.
If you're heavy, that you'll need a little bit of burner probably to hold it in there.
Oh, wow.
So the best technique is to have a real light touch on the stick as you're attempting to control it and pitch. And if you get to the point where you're just in a pilot-induced oscillation of PIO, it's best to just back away, let it settle out, and then start over rather than continue to try and force it when you're close to the tanker.
Gotcha. It'd be a bad day for both if something went wrong.
Well, yeah, the tanker's going to call a breakaway very quickly if they start to see you.
Nice.
If they start that happening, that gets their attention in a hurry.
Now, how about a typical mission length? What would be a typical mission length?
I'm back and giving up.
Good to see you, Rick.
Thank you for coming and doing it.
Anytime. Same here.
Last year's pretty good shape.
Yeah, me too. It's a good sign.
Later.
Take care.
Nice. Again, I'll edit that out.
Sure. So typical mission duration, it all depends on what you're doing. If you are in how many bags of gas you have, how many external tanks.
You did correctly.
So yeah, where were we on the the tanks, right?
Yeah, mission duration.
So a typical air-to-air profile, if you're going to go out and do some basic fighter maneuvers, BFM, dogfighting, you'll probably have a single centerline 600-gallon tank on.
Okay.
So that tank on, you are good for usually about a 1.0. You
Okay.
know, If you're doing a little longer mission, air to ground usually, you'll put the wing tanks on, and that'll give you a little bit more duration, maybe a 1.5, something in that range, maybe 1.8,
Okay.
depending on your altitude. If you're down low and you're doing a target ingress at 550 knots, obviously you're sucking down quite a bit of fuel.
Gotcha.
So.
And I'm glad you just brought up the subject as far as BFM and dogfighting. How is this in a dogfight? What would be an advantage for this? Zoom and boom, or are you going to get in the phone booth with somebody, and slug it out, or
Against
do
a modern
circuit?
fighter, probably your advantage is that you're going to slow down more quickly than they ever anticipated.
Like getting a turn and pull hard and could bring that nose around.
The rate that the Phantom bleeds off airspeed under G will probably be eye-opening for a guy in a modern fighter.
Oh, awesome.
No, it wasn't built to be a dogfighting machine, and it's not.
Okay.
It is, in its day, it was superior in thrust, in thrust to weight to a lot of the aircraft. So the tactics against a MiG 17 or 19 were to use the vertical,
Right.
which,
Outrate 'em.
as fighter pilots know, you only use the vertical when you have exclusive use of the vertical to go up. So in that day, that was how they fought it. But versus a modern fighter, that doesn't work as well, obviously, because you don't have an exclusive use of the vertical. The modern fighters have better thrust and weight restrictions. They'll outclimb you, and go up, blow up is kind of the modern thought on that maneuver.
Right.
It sounds like something interesting.
So you're trying to
You gotta
avoid
go
it.
look.
B-25. Oh, the B-25. We'll see if I say hi to pilots then.
All right.
Sorry.
Yeah, I got it. So you're trying to avoid a turn fight and just try to get in and get out as fast as you can?
Yeah, so speed is, it's obviously a fast machine, and especially when you get to lower altitudes, 5,000-10,000 feet, its acceleration is really good,
Awesome.
So you have that ability to just, bump and run, and I think that's probably it.
Get in and get out and try not to
Right.
slug it out with
You
an
don't want to
adversary.
get in a phone booth with any of the modern jets,
Awesome.
because the difference in turn rate and radius is an F-16 is roughly turns twice as quickly and in half the distance.
It has
So-
a really nice engine to get that thing going faster.
Right, so you don't, but, high speed, the radar that they put in these, I don't know which one you're running in your E-model variant, probably ABQ-120, I would guess.
Possibly.
So the problem with that was it wasn't a pulse topper radar, but it still had plenty of power.
Right.
And so it can pick out an enemy at a real decent distance and shoot a radar guided missile, from beyond visual range, and that's really what that it would excel at.
Awesome. Well, that's pretty much all I got for today. Thank you very much for covering all that and giving us a quick glimpse into
Absolutely.
that, and also for putting on that lovely show we saw earlier with the College
Well, it's too
Foundation
bad we
work.
couldn't get it airborne.
That would have made even better film, and I imagine my audience would have really loved that. Anyway, thank you for your service and thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you.